Very happy to be here today. Peggy and I have anticipated this trip since we planned it in February, but really in our hearts, we've anticipated this trip for much longer than that, many years. We've known a number of people that have come out here that you love. We love the same people. And so it's wonderful to come out and to be with the family of Christ and know that you're family anywhere. We started coming to church when I was about 13 years old, and we would travel to meetings. And we would do that. I would be envious of other people because they would go places. And other people would know them. They would be known. And they would walk into a meeting of 900 people, 1,000, 1,200, and people would know them. And I remember thinking as a 13-year-old child, I want that someday. And so as I walked in here today, Peggy and I were looking at the pictures, and we thought, we know you. We know you before we got here because you know and you love the same people that we know and love. And that's pretty incredible. And that's why we are the family of Christ. And I know that Ohana, family, is a big word here in Hawaii. And so oftentimes we as people like to think that we invent words that mean something. And you find out that in Scripture, God really invented a lot of these things. But I love the fact that this island embraces the concept of family. We're going to talk about a family in the Scriptures in Genesis chapter 49, and we're really reaching the family in a very intimate time in their life. I don't know that I would want my passing hours to be recorded in the world's best-selling book, but we have that with this family. We have Jacob here as God changed his name to Israel, and here's the 12 sons, the 12 tribes will come from this. And he had other children that were daughters, but he had 12 sons. And so here he is on his deathbed, and he's having a conversation with them to hopefully get the trajectory of their life the right way. Who here has children, and you think about that? Peggy and I have 5 kids, we have 13 grandkids, and that is one of the greatest focuses in our life, getting those souls to heaven. Whether I lose an arm or a leg or something like that, just doesn't make any difference. And I want to keep the ones I have. But if I had to choose between our children and our grandchildren being saved, it will always come to our kids. So young people understand this. We are here for you and for your beautiful smiles. And you make a difference by being here. There's a day coming when I won't be around anymore. I will follow the path of all humanity. Time will take its toll and I'll be gone. And we will be placing the gospel in your hands, and you will be the difference makers on that day. And so what's happening in this family here is Jacob, or Israel, is about ready to die. And so he summoned his 12 sons together with him, and he's going to say to them these words, Genesis 49, verses 1 and 2. And Jacob called unto his sons, and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which may befall you in the last days. Gather yourselves together, and hear, ye sons of Jacob, and hearken unto Israel your father. I want to make this point very clear. When he says, I'm going to tell you what may befall you in the last days, he's not saying, I have a crystal ball, and I'm seeing the future. What he is saying is, I've seen what you're like. Moms, you can look back, dads, and see your children and say, I know this child. I know their behavior. I know the trajectory of their life. And as he is saying this to his sons, he's not cursing them or willing this to happen. He's saying, if you keep headed the way you're heading in life, this is going to be your lot in life. Now, some of them he has lavish praise for, but others he has very harsh condemnation for them. And so what he's saying to the ones with lavish praise, keep it up. You're doing well. And what we tell our kids, you can do even better yet. So take wherever you are. Raise your game. Keep raising your game. And that's what we expect of our children. In the parable of the talents, we find that that's what God expects from His children. The 1 talent should have been 2. The 2 talent should have, and so on. The 5 talent went to 10. And to those that grew their talents, God expressed wonderful pleasure in them. But to the one that had 1 talent and he hid it, he called him a wicked and slothful servant. Well, you might think he was a murderer or something, right? Well, he wasn't. Wasn't a thief, wasn't a murderer. He just was not growing the talents he had. And that, by definition of Scripture, was wickedness. Now, when we look at these other people that had bad traits in their life, he's not saying to them, you have to be bad the rest of your life. Really what's happening is he's saying, this is your wake-up call. I want you to take the bad trajectory that you're on, and I want you to make your life better. You have an opportunity to listen to what I'm about ready to say to you. And Jacob called his sons and said, gather yourselves together that I may tell you that which may befall you in the last days. Son, if you're off track and you don't get on track, this is what's going to happen. We tell our kids those kind of things all the time, don't we? Because we want them to be better than anything we've ever been. I want to be so proud of my children because they've taken the platform we've given them and they've raised their game. Now kids, think about this. I'm going to just throw this in as a sideline. 1 Samuel chapter 3. We have here Samuel the prophet. And we have Eli, who is a priest. And we have Elkanah and Hannah. And they prayed and prayed and prayed for a child. And that child was given them. His name was Samuel. He was going to be a mighty prophet. And the mother said, as soon as a child reaches a certain age, if you'll let me have a child, because she was barren, if you'll let me have a child, I will dedicate that child to you all the days of his life. So the thing that's going to come back to you kids is this little son, Samuel, received a prophecy that he was going to tell the priest, Eli. And this message comes to you who are younger, because I remember thinking, man, when I just get to be 21, I will be my own man. Dad, you better be ready to get out of the way, because at that time I'm my own man. Well, here is now Eli, and he has two sons, and we don't know exactly how old they are, but we know they're over the age of 30 because they were priests in the temple also. And you couldn't be a priest in the temple unless you were over the age of 30. So here is little Samuel. God comes to him and tells him, you go to Eli and you tell him X. And I'm going to read that X in a minute. And remember now, Eli is beginning to be an older man and his kids are over the age of 30. And he goes to him and he says this, and the Lord came and stood with Samuel. And Samuel said, speak to me, Lord, your servant will hear. And the Lord said to Samuel, remember, this is a child going to say this message to a priest. And Samuel, behold, I will do the thing in Israel. This is God speaking to Samuel. Behold, I will do a thing in Israel, at which both the ears of everyone that hears it shall tingle. In that day I will perform against Eli all things which I have spoken concerning his house. When I begin, I will also make an end. He's saying, I'm going to clean your clock with what I'm about to tell you. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever. Forever is a pretty long time. I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knows, because his sons made themselves vile, and he did not restrain them. Therefore I have sworn to the house of Eli, that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice or burnt offering forever. My dad died about 5 years ago. My dad was 84. And if my dad said something to me, and at that time I was a 61-year-old, if my dad said something to me, the answer was going to be, yes, sir. And it was going to be that way until my dad was gone. Young people, understand, God is placing that parental authority. Now, my relationship with my kids is not the same as when they were little. I understand that. So, I don't tell them to go pick up the room. That's up to them now. But if they get spiritually off base, and I say something to my 44-year-old son, there's one thing I need to hear from him, and it is, yes, sir. And if my wife is saying it, she's going to hear, yes, ma'am. Remember, these kiddos were over the age of 30, and because they did not receive the rebuke from the father is going to be punished. What do I have to do as a parent? I have to yield to you, my children, even my adult children, what you need to hear. So you can't say, Dad, I'm 21 now. Or Dad, I'm 44. We have a 42. We have a 40-year-old. 36-year-old. 26-year-old. We thought we were done with 4. We were wrong. We had number 5, the bonus baby. The fact is, as long as I'm alive, I can't say they're no longer underneath my authority. Eli thought that. And it was a sin that burnt offering or sacrifice would purge forever. So here's Jacob, Israel, and he's about ready to die. And what is he doing? He is still parenting his children. Job doesn't end. I knew when I married Peggy, till death do you part. I did not understand biblically that with the children, till death do you part. Kids, listen to your parents. That job does not end, nor does your responsibility end. So here he is before them, and he's saying to them, I'm going to tell you what's going to befall you in the last day. Can you imagine someone saying, Dad, what do you mean? I think I'm a pretty all right guy. And he's saying you're not pretty all right. You got some problems. If you turn to Luke chapter 13, verse 3 through 5, and I'm not going to read it, but I'm going to paraphrase it this way. Jesus is talking to some people that thought they were pretty good guys. And they were comparing themselves to some really, really bad guys. And Jesus said, I tell you nay, that except you repent, you'll also likewise perish. Did you think the people on whom the tower of Siloam fell, you thought they were evil and wicked? Look at yourself. And he says again in verse 5, I tell you nay, but except you repent, you shall also likewise perish. So he's talking to people that thought they were good guys. It's pretty easy for us to think we're good guys, right? If we do not examine the Word, the Scripture tells us we can be self-deceived. So we have to constantly be examining. We have to be talking to each other as brothers and sisters in Christ. We need to be reading the Scriptures in our homes, else we're not going to know. Please do not just assume, hey, I'm a pretty good guy. Because that's what these people did in Luke chapter 13, verses 3 through 5. And Jesus said they were wrong. So we're going to start working our way through these guys here now. We're not going to get through all 12 of them. And about this time, you're probably going, phew, this could last a while. We're probably going to get through about half of them this morning. So, Reuben, verse 3. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, in the beginning of my strength and excellency of dignity. Excellency is power. Back in that day and time, they put a lot of potential or effort and expectation on the firstborn. I'll tell you this, it's not the way it is in this time. It doesn't all fall on the firstborn's shoulders. I expect great things from my 26-year-old that I expect from my 44-year-old. The game needs to be high for every one of them. So kiddos, whatever your age is, wherever you fall in the lineage, God is expecting excellence from you. Now I can imagine looking at Reuben, think about these things. Thou art my firstborn, my might, my strength, the beginning of excellency, of dignity, of power. When you look at Reuben, Reuben looks like a leader. He's probably not 6'7" like I am, but he was probably pretty tall. I know you're thinking I might not be quite 6'7". But Reuben, he was this tall. He probably had hair on his knuckles. You know the guys that really look manly kind of guys? This would be Reuben. When you looked at him, he looked stately. Dad put all the effort into Reuben so that when he was gone, Reuben would be the guy that carried the torch of godliness and of good and right and prosperity in the family. The beginning of my strength, excellency of dignity, excellency of power. This is a pretty incredible man, right? This is a story about a man that could have been and should have been, but wasn't. The very next verse. Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel. Because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, thou defilest it when he went up to my couch. Now, he's talking about a sexual impropriety that he had here with probably one of his concubines. And so he's condemning him for that. Now, understand this. Reuben was probably a really nice guy 98% of the time. I don't know, maybe it's 97, maybe it's 99. Doesn't make any difference. But Reuben was probably a pretty nice guy. But he had a vice that he chose not to control. And it would be his sexual appetites. And because of that, he let it rule his life. Now again, this isn't something that happened 50, 60, 70% of the time, but it defined what his character was. My character isn't defined by what I do in most of the time, because I can be a pretty easygoing guy most of the time. My character is defined as what happens when I fall under temptation. Whether it be a temptation to steal, a temptation for anger, a temptation for lust. That defines who and what I am in my heart, doesn't it? Because it's really nothing to go along in life and pretend to be somebody that I'm not in my heart of hearts. So we think about these guys as we're going through this. I want you to do this exercise. We're going to see some good guys, some bad guys. And you may say to yourself, self, I don't have this problem, or this problem, or that problem. The message to each of us is to say, but I can look beyond these particular people, and I can say, but I have this problem over here. Even though Brother Lonnie didn't mention it, this one over here is the thing it doesn't say anything in here about stealing. It doesn't say anything in here about lying, or beating up your brother or sister, or beating on your wife, or your wife beating on your husband. So there's a lot of other bad things that could be happening here. So what you're going to have to do is extrapolate. When I see these things, okay, this one's not necessarily mine, but you know, if he was talking to me, this is what he would be talking about with me. Or maybe something over here. So read between the lines and say, maybe this one isn't me, but there's something else out there that does describe my vice. Isn't that awful? Verse 3, unstable as water, thou shalt not excel. One of the verses I wrote on the board, Proverbs 25 and 28. It said, a man who has no rule over himself is like a city that has no walls. In our day and time, we don't think about a city with walls. In this day and time, when that was written, if you didn't have walls, you were dead. Because somebody was going to come in and take over your city and plunder it, plunder your family, take the wealth that you'd saved up for a lifetime. A city with no walls was absolute insanity in that day and time. But think about that then as far as you and I go. If I have no walls, no borders, no boundaries, what might I do? What might I not do? When you think about Reuben, he was supposed to be a leader of men. He was supposed to be a leader in the family and beyond, really, beyond family. But it wasn't going to happen. What about you and I as far as our leadership acumen, our skill sets go? Can God look back at you and say, I can count on this brother. I can count on this sister. When something happens, she will have the pot roast there. If you're going to get to somebody that's sick, you better be pretty fast, because Sister so-and-so, she's going to have the pot roast there. It's going to be tough for you to beat that, because that woman's a leader. Or so-and-so over there, when somebody needs a ride to church this morning, and I know that was done, will so-and-so be there to do that? Can God count on you? And I wonder sometimes, when he looks at you, when he looks at me, does he scratch his head and say, well, maybe he'll be there. It's just possible he'll be there. God needs to count on you and I to say, when something happens, I'm going to go to the game changer. I'm going to go to the person that will get it done. Or are we like a city that has no walls? Well, maybe it'll happen. Maybe it won't happen. With siblings, so-and-so, can we be there to help the brothers or sisters? Can we be there to help mom, to help dad? Are we going to be the one to be counted on? Or am I going to do the fussy, whiny thing? Young and old, we ask the same question. Am I unstable as water and I shall not excel? Or am I going to be one of God's go-to people? That's what we need to do. The next couple brothers he mentions together. Simeon and Levi. are brethren. And that's about as nice as it gets. They share some chromosomes. They share some DNA together. And it goes downhill quick from there. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. Again, think with me about this. Simeon and Levi are probably pretty nice guys most of the time. But when it comes to a problem, don't invite Simeon and Levi there to make things better, because one's going to bring the gas and the other's going to bring the matches. And it's going to get uglier than it was before they got there. So, do we bring the matches and the gas? Or are we the peacemakers spoken of in Matthew chapter 5? Blessed are the peacemakers. Why? Because they shall be called the sons of God. Jesus was the great reconciler. And He's committed to us the word of reconciliation. Gas and matches? Peacemaker. These two guys were gas and matches. Now again, 90, 95%, who knows, 98% of the time, that wasn't them. But when God needs you and I most is when things get difficult. And when things get difficult, that is when true character is revealed. Which are you? You get to ask yourself that question. Am I gas and matches? Verse 6, O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly mine honor. Be thou not united, for in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they dig down a wall. Please know this. It isn't a matter of one situation of anger. He mentions one. But it doesn't really make sense to mention one thing if it never happened and it ain't going to happen again. This is mentioned because this is their character. They were men of anger. Now, I don't have time to go into the story about dying to their sister and her going to marry somebody else, because this is what happens. They did some awful things to that family. But these guys were ruled by anger. Again, 98% of the time, invite them over for dinner. They're going to have a great time with you. Something tough comes up, get back, because they're going to burn you. Like the passage here, Ephesians 4:26. Be ye angry. Now there's a second part of that verse. But I want to focus on this first part here for a moment. It's a command to be angry. You look at the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt, be ye. Those are the same. Be ye angry. What would the cross have looked like had there been a couple hundred people that just said, this isn't right? We are angry. This isn't going to go down easily on our watch. And you say to yourself, Lonnie, there would have been 200 more crosses. Maybe so. But how different would that day have smelled and felt had Jesus not died alone? Had somebody stood up and said in anger, this isn't right. Maybe you suffer the same fate. But today, would they be happy they suffered that fate? Lord knows it would have been a happy day. It would have been an awful day in one regard. But Jesus to not die alone, that'd be a good day. And so when you think about these guys here, you think about the be angry. There is a time when it is appropriate to be angry. But then the next part of that sentence that we're all familiar with, and do not sin. So when you and I are angry, we can take it one of two ways. The way that becomes helpful and is godly, like Jesus when He was driving them out of the temple in His anger, the money changers, or we can take it the wrong way and take bad and make it worse. Be angry and sin not. It's okay to be angry. Let the emotion happen, but let it have a check and balance inside of your heart. You know, I tell you this, you start picking on one of Peggy's kids and the green hair will come out on her teeth pretty quick. You don't mess with Peggy's kids. There's rules, and it's going to be unpleasant. What about you other mothers? You think somebody starts doing something to your kid, you going to be angry? Lord willing, you will be. But Lord willing, also you'll teach the kid how to deal with the situation in the right way, because they need to see how godly people handle difficult situations. Be angry and sin not. Now I love this other piece here. I don't hear a lot of press about it, but it says, and let not the sun go down upon your wrath. Simple interpretation. I cannot have a godly right to go to bed that night until I've done on my part what I can to make peace with you. Now, you may not do your part to make peace with me, but I'm not held accountable for that. But I do not have a right to go to bed that night, any night, unless I've done everything within my power to make peace with you. And I can lay down after that and say, Lord, I've done my part. Now I pray the other person will do their part. Having a disagreement with the spouse, a disagreement with the neighbor, somebody at church, one of the kids, maybe the kids to the parent. Kids, maybe it's time to go to mom and dad and say, I'm sorry. I didn't act very good today. There have been times with me as a parent, I've had to say to the kids, I didn't do that one well. Can you forgive me for it? Key again, I need to do that before I go to bed that night. Why would that rule be there? Do you think it gets easier the next day to do that? It doesn't get easier, does it? In fact, I start digging my toenails in. It gets tough to do. Be angry, sin not, do not let the sun go down upon your wrath. Other cousins, we are not going to have a lot of time to spend on this. In Matthew 7:2 it says, whatever measure of mercy, mercy's a cousin to this anger thing. It's a first cousin to it. He goes on to say, whatever measure you use in your mercy to others is how God will give mercy to you. So I began to think about this. I had this epiphany. I was too old. I should have had this epiphany younger. All of a sudden it dawned on me. Here's all these levers in judgment. And I have control over every one of them. Sometimes judgment seems like this black box of goo stuff. That, you know, I think I kind of figure out how it goes. But it's not that at all. I am telling God every day how much mercy I want. I want buckets of it. I want a landslide of mercy. I want it to cover me so that you can't see anything but the mercy. The only way I can do that is if I do that to you, and to you, and to you. And I'm going to take it a step further. Jesus said, inasmuch as you've not done it to the least of these my children, you've done it not to me. Think of your worst enemy on the planet. That's the least, isn't it? That is the least. Inasmuch you've not done it to the least of these, given them mercy, or whatever else it was, then you've not done it to me. Think about this. I have huge control over how much mercy I receive in judgment. One of the keys is Matthew 18:35. After the parable of the unforgiving servant comes into play, and Jesus said, if you do not forgive from your heart, then God won't forgive you. I've talked to people before, perhaps you have, I forgive, but I won't forget it. You ever kind of got that glassy look from somebody? Oh, I forgive you. Well, they're using the vocabulary, but they're missing the whole concept of biblical forgiveness. Biblical forgiveness says, I forgive you from the heart. Anything less isn't really forgiveness. So God looking on me, He's reading my heart. I heard what you said, Lonnie. But I also see what's going on up here, and I see how you're treating so-and-so. Forgive from the heart and move on. James chapter 2, verse 13. He who judges without mercy will be judged without mercy. Boy, I'd love to spend more time on that. We need to move on. Tell you what, how about if we find a good guy now? We've had 3 guys who are really not on the good side. Judah, verse 8. Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. What do you think that Simeon and Levi are thinking now? Whoa! We're the older ones. There ain't no praise going downhill. There ain't no praise goes uphill. In this case, though, he is telling in front of everybody whom he has just shamed, Reuben and Simeon and Levi. Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Thy hand shall be on the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before thee. He's going to talk about the science of that in a minute. But a little of the signs is this. His hand is on the neck of his enemies. I love that spot back there when the kids were little bitty. Man, I could kiss on their little necks, and it was just like sucking on honey. You know what I'm talking about, Mama, don't you? Mm-hmm. It was so sweet back there on that part of the neck. He wasn't talking about, and his hand was on the back of their neck. That wasn't what was happening here. He was talking about this. Doesn't that feel good? Man, there's extra nerves back there. Have you ever had somebody come up and just kind of start giving you a massage? There's so many nerves right around there, that just feels good. Think about the diplomacy that jettisoned this man from being one of the younger ones to being one whom his brethren would bow down to and praise. Now, I don't want to communicate to you that Judah didn't have faults, because if you go back and look back, Joseph was sold into slavery. Judah's one of them that said, yeah, sell the boy. Sell the boy. Highest bidder, Judah was one of them. Nonetheless, that was not the direction of his life when taken as a whole. Reuben, that was a direction. Simeon and Levi, that's a direction. Anybody has a bad day. Judah had a bad day, but in general, his life was on target. It goes on to say, Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. He stooped down. He couched as a lion. And as a lion, as an old lion, who shall rouse him up? This was a man who was crisp and in charge. And he was a loving man. It talks here in very clear terms. He was a young, not really strapping man like Reuben. What does it say about Reuben? Excellency of dignity, excellency of power, excellency of... Doesn't say any of that about Judah, does it? The good thing that tells about me is I'm not 6'7", and I don't have a lot of hair on my knuckles, and there's things about me that you might say, I'm not saying the greatest leader of men here. Nonetheless, it wasn't about stature. It was about what he did and who he was. And it talks about him. And it says that they treated him as if he was an old lion. An old lion, he growls. When the old lion growls, people listen. But it says he was a lion's whelp. And gather this with me. It says, and he would stoop down. He turned his back. And no one would dare to rouse him. That's power. That is power. And that is Judah. Think about him. Revelation chapter 5. Talking about Jesus here. Beginning of verse 1. And I saw on the right hand of him that sat on the throne, and a book was within his hand, and with the seven seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, Who is worthy to open the book, and to loosen the seals thereof? And no man in heaven, no man in earth, neither under the earth was able to open the book, neither to look upon it. And then I wept much, because no man was found worthy to open, to read the book, neither to look thereon. All of judgment and mercy was hinging on the ability to open this book. Huge. And I wept much, because no man was found worthy. Verse 5. And one of the elders saith unto me, Weep not. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. It comes into play here. The Lion of the tribe of Judah. The root of David hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the seals thereof. Judah made decisions in his life to be who he was. He decided to be the lion's whelp, whatever God dealt him with a physical stature and look. And he was the lion's whelp. But because of the decisions he made in life, he was going to rule the roost of things going forward. Not only for that day and time, but from generations ago. I don't know my great-great-grandchildren. I will probably never see my great-great-grandchildren. But I want to leave a legacy for them that says, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And if it comes down to me living the better life, Peggy living the better life, that's what we're going to do. Because we want to leave that root. I want to skip on down and read about a couple others here. Now, the interesting thing about these others, a couple others that are coming up, bear with me, please, is that these next few guys were probably about as ordinary as they come. And maybe that's me. Maybe I'm not Judah. But I'm going to read about these next two guys. And they were the everyday people like us. Not extraordinarily talented, but they still had gifts and skills. The first one here, talking about Zebulun. Again, it doesn't spend a lot of time and space here. One verse. Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be a haven for ships, and his borders shall face Sidon. We had a family back at 85th and Euclid in Kansas City years ago by the name of Bill and Gladys Stout. Bill was never going to give a sermon. That was okay. While Bill and Gladys Stout were there, the building never got dirty. The sheetrock never shifted and settled. The paint never needed to be painted. The lawn never needed to be mowed for I don't know how many years before I got there. But Bill Stout and Gladys Stout, the Zebulons of life. And they were some of them that if you wanted to get in the car to bring the pot roast, you better have a fast car. Because Bill and Gladys Stout were going to be there. If you needed some help, Zebulon, Bill and Gladys Stout were going to be there. And about every congregation I've been at, there have been Zebulons. Be a Zebulon. Be one of those. We may not rule from the mountaintop, but you know what? There's a lot of work done at the ground roots level, and it's just as important as the work clear up here. Be a Zebulon. It is important. You are the difference makers, and it's huge. Now here's Issachar. Again, I'm not trying to gauge merit or talents or value, because value is not mine to measure. But what I do know is that if it came to a value of Zebulun or Judah, the Lord of heaven put them on the same plane by what he said here about them. But here's Issachar. Issachar is a strong beast, couching down between two burdens. Excuse me. And he saw that rest was good, and that the land was pleasant, and he bowed his shoulder to bear burden, and became a servant to tribute. Other passages say he became slave. Here were probably two men that were very equally talented. One chose to be a servant. The other chose to engulf himself in the world until the world ate him alive. And he became just like the world, and he became a slave to it. We'll turn over to Philippians chapter 3, beginning at verse 18. Paul says, "For many walk, of whom I have told you often, and now tell you, even weeping." This isn't good. The storyline is not starting off good at all. "Many walk, of whom I have told you now, and tell you, even weeping, that they are the enemies of the cross of Christ." It's time for goosebumps. It's okay. Because these wicked people we're going to read about here, by this definition, had something that the Lord did not like. What was it? I need to know so that I don't become like that. Verse 19. "Whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, whose glory is their shame." What is it? Tell me, Paul. I need to know. "And they mind earthly things." That was the awfulness of it. They became so wrapped up in the world that spiritual things didn't really have time for cultivation and harvest and fruition in life. Yeah, they could come and they could make a spot on that bench 98.6 degrees as well as anybody. Were they game changers? I don't even think they were in the game. They were just present. They were just there. God wants us to do more than be there and to be present. This man became a slave to tribute. Money, things, time, no time for the Lord. They were all about things of life. We can do better than that. I'm going to skip down and I'm going to mention just one more here. I love this last one. Verse 21. And it doesn't say a lot about him. Naphtali. Naphtali is a hind let loose. That's a baby deer. If you ever watch a baby deer, those things are crazy funny to watch. They may just be running around bouncing off a tree or throwing a nut in the air. They may just be doing anything kind of silly you can think of. But they're living a loving and a carefree life. And so, as the writer is putting this, Naphtali, from father to son, he is a hind let loose. And it goes on to say there in the last part, he gives goodly words. You know, there's an expression from years ago. I still love it. Maybe it shows how old I am. And it says, everyone brings joy to the room. Some when they enter, and some when they leave. I want to be the guy that brings joy to the room when I open the door. There's Lonnie. Things just got better. Think it's going to be all right because Brother Lonnie just came in the room, or Sister Peggy, or whoever else it could apply to. Be the Naphtali. If I have very few words written on my small tombstone, I'm okay if it's these words. Lonnie, he brought goodly words. Sometimes all you need to do to change somebody's day is say the right thing. Have you ever been around somebody who was just kind of a downer? And it became your challenge to get the downer out of them and bring the sweetness into the day. And so when you see that happening, be the guy that's the game changer, or the lady, because we can make the difference. It becomes our challenge to make every room brighter, every situation a little bit sweeter. Now sometimes it's a situation that can be very difficult. Perhaps somebody's passed away. They passed away in very difficult circumstances. And so it may be hard to bring that light and joy to the room. But you can do it. We were in Kansas City one time, and I got a call and somebody said, Lonnie, you're going to do a funeral when you get back. And it was a fellow who got caught with in an illicit situation with the wrong young lady doing a bad drug deal, and he got shot. Preach that guy into heaven. You know? So I did my best. And fortunately, there was a certain amount of Bible and literacy there. And I said, here's Perry. And what Perry wants for you is to make sure your soul is secure. And I tried to bring the best words I could to the occasion. Sometimes it's not easy. But did God give that challenge to you and to me? And my grandpa would say, sure shooting. He did. God gave that challenge to you and I to be the person with the goodly words. I hope this has been beneficial to you this morning. I love looking at this family. This could be your family. It could be my family. It could be a congregation. It could be the environment that you work in on the job or whatever. But look at this and just say, what will my legacy be? Everybody's leaving a footprint. Doesn't make any difference who you are. We are leaving a footprint through life. When I was a kid, I was kind of a pyromaniac kid. I set the alley on fire behind our house. And so when I see those cousins from years ago, I don't see them around, they say, yeah, you're the one that lit the fire in the alley. Can we find something else to remember, please? Is there nothing else that we can think of? But we're leaving a legacy. Sometimes we leave a legacy that may follow us for years. Hard to break out of that. Plan your legacy. Every day, every moment, make it the one where God looks down and says, this is my beloved child, in whom I am well pleased. Do that. You'll never regret. We tell the kids all the time, leave as little regrets as possible, and 0 is the best number. As little regrets as possible. We're going to extend the invitation to you. If you're outside of the fold of safety, that may be that you've never obeyed the gospel. If you haven't, and you're young enough, talk with your parents, talk with one of the leaders here. And if it's time for you to obey the gospel, coordinate that with them. If you have obeyed and